It was a night like any other. Everyone was asleep except for me. I have trouble sleeping. Always have. I could hear my parents snoring in the room. My little brother wasn't there that night and he was staying with our cousins. A sleepover. I was 11 at that time and I didn't want to go. I thought I was too cool for that. Instead, I was in the living room watching Jay Leno. Late night TV kept me awake on those long nights. We only had the one TV and it was in the living room, so I always left my bed and sat on the couch when I couldn't sleep. My parents never noticed, or they didn't care. Or maybe they were too tired to notice. I don't know. They never said anything to me about it. I must have dozed off at some point because last I checked it was 11 p.m., but my watch said 4 a.m. All the lights were off. It was quiet, too quiet. Even the TV was off, but I didn't remember turning it off. I thought maybe the storm took the electricity out for a second. 4 a.m. I never liked that hour, probably because of everything I had heard as a kid. My family always said that was the witching hour. They had all sorts of stories about ghosts and witches and, well, everything. They especially said nothing good happened after midnight. But 3 a.m., that was the devil's hour. And well, 4 a.m. was just too close to 3 a.m. The worst stories always took place in Mexico. So at the time that this happened, I thought I was safe. In my 11-year-old brain, I was pretty far from Mexico, therefore safe. Really, I was pretty close. The house that we lived in back then, it was in the RGV, the Rio Grande Valley in Texas. But in my 11-year-old brain, those scary stories my family always told, they didn't happen here. They only happened in Mexico, so I was safe. I had taken another look at my watch, 4:05 a.m. I rubbed my eyes and thought maybe I'd fall asleep again if I went to bed. So I stood up to head to bed, and that's when I heard a sound. I couldn't place the sound, not until I heard it again. It was screaming. No, not screaming, crying. If scream, crying was a word, that would have described what I heard that night. A woman crying and maybe screaming a little bit. I was a little scared, but I started freaking out a bit more when I remembered a story that a cousin had told me a few months before that night. The story of La Llorona, the weeping woman. My cousin said that this happened a very long time ago and that she was named Maria. Maria was young but beautiful and she had met a man who was rich. Maria was not rich. But they got married anyway. She was happy. They had 2 kids, a boy and a girl. But her husband changed and one day he didn't love her anymore. He told Maria he was leaving her. She was furious, but nothing made her more mad than when she saw her husband with a younger woman. When she saw that, she ran back home and took her kids to the river. None of them were seen again. The townspeople figured that she had drowned them because she was jealous. After that happened, once it got dark, many in town began hearing cries, and some said to have seen a woman in a white dress appear near the river. They said that she would take kids, boys and girls, it didn't matter. She was looking for her kids. At least that's how I remember the story. I figured my cousin was exaggerating to try and scare me. But I heard it again. Crying. Was it closer? I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't remember at the time. What was it that I heard? If the screams were far, La Llorona was close, or had it been the other way around? I didn't know. I wanted to think that I had imagined the cries, but there was again, crying. There was a ditch right by our house, and it sort of sounded like the screams were coming from there. Still, I wanted to convince myself that this was my imagination, but I heard the dogs barking. This meant that they could hear it too. This was real. At this point, I was panicking, terrified, frozen on the couch. I turned to look at the door. I'm still not sure why I turned. The door was to my left. I turned my head left, and that's when I heard it. A whisper, right in my ear. Mis hijos. Mis I ran. I was 11 when this happened. Of course I ran. I ran straight to my parents' room. I woke them up and I told them what I heard. They told me it was my imagination, that it was the wind. They couldn't agree on what I heard or what I saw or whether it was. They couldn't agree on which one, but they could agree that it wasn't real. They could agree that they didn't believe me. I knew what I heard. I knew it was real. I didn't know what to do. I went back to the living room, turned the lights on, turned the TV back on, sat back down. I wasn't gonna fall back asleep. I didn't hear it again, at least not that night.